this is a bit weird this morning because it was in 2019, wasn't it? Was it December 2019, the general election? Is it December 2019? I mean, if it wasn't for coronavirus, that would probably still feel like yesterday. As it is, it feels like eons ago. But he came into Parliament on a tidal wave of support from constituencies that had previously been more likely to return a watermelon to Parliament than a Conservative MP. A watermelon with a Labour rosette would have won many of these seats before most people who grew up there could contemplate delivering a Conservative member back to Parliament. He arrived in the House of Commons with a majority of over 80 seats. That is an astonishing mandate to do more or less whatever you want, or so he thought. Certainly in a legislative or a parliamentary context, he could do whatever he wanted to do, except, of course, influence the minds of negotiating partners from other sovereign countries. That perhaps was the first of the lies to fall after he arrived in Downing Street. The idea that by sheer force of will or personality, or God forbid, belief or unicornism, then the European Union would miraculously turn its back upon a lot of the issues and requirements that it had been reiterating for years. But he came in with the support of this so-called Red Wall. And I find it fascinating that they have reportedly already turned on him. Now, I don't know if we'll confine today's conversation to voters from those constituencies, but I might start off trying to. As ever, I like to make my job harder. Every minute of the opening moments on the programme, I like to make the job a little harder than it is already by narrowing the focus down to people who are really qualified to comment on the question of what is going on. So the Red Wall constituencies are the ones that are most interesting here. The ones elected in 2019, to broaden it out slightly, the ones who got in 2019, about 20 of them gathered to discuss Boris Johnson's fate. And one of them has already publicly confirmed that he's submitted a letter of no confidence in Mr. Johnson. And I'm not, obviously, if you've ever listened to this programme for more than 6 seconds, you will not be in need of me explaining that I'm not a big fan of Boris Johnson. I mean, in fact, it's probably worth reminding some people. I had to leave the BBC in order to retain my freedom to criticise Boris Johnson in particular, Brexit in general, and Donald Trump as well. Actually had to quit the BBC in order to be able to continue to criticise Boris Johnson. But there is, as I discovered on Twitter yesterday, still a small rump of true believers who think that I put Boris Johnson in Downing Street. I'll leave you to do the sums on that one. So the idea that I would be encouraging you to feel some sympathy for him is, I hope, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But they're pretty ungrateful, aren't they? It's like, I mean, this is the caveat emptor bit of the equation, isn't it? The buyer beware. How can they, after 2 and a bit years, turn around and complain about Boris Johnson being exactly who he was when they hitched themselves to his coattails? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Can you talk me through the calculation here? The Red Wall is not buying the red meat, suggests Caroline. And I never like the depiction of constituencies or the depiction of our population as being markedly different according to geography. There are always going to be regional characteristics, even national characteristics, but they're very broad brushstrokes. The concerns of somebody in Doncaster are generally pretty similar to the concerns of somebody in Dunstable or Dover or Deptford. But they insist on doing these simplistic breakdowns. And there is a broad truth in the idea of constituencies that had never returned a Conservative MP returning a Conservative MP. And that's what intrigues me today, is I just want to get a better idea of what happened in those constituencies, because I wonder what these MPs think they represent. I know that the combination of deeply dishonest politicians and an incredibly craven client newspaper industry had inflated the idea that Brexit was something that must be done and would be good to such a ludicrous degree. Again, this was probably a bit of the sort of malevolent influence of Dominic Cummings, persuading people that they really, really wanted something that was incredibly bad for them, is, when you think about it, the secret of 20th century marketing. Whether you're talking about fizzy pop or palm oil, whether you're talking about ready meals or cheeseburgers, whether you're talking about cigarettes or beer, persuading people that they really, really want and need stuff that will actually kill them is the mark of a brilliant marketeer. And if Brexit and Boris Johnson could be viewed as the cheeseburger and fizzy pop of recent British politics, then Dominic Cummings was, of course, the malevolent marketeer who persuaded fat swathes of the country that they wanted nothing more than to get hopped up on incredibly sugary drinks while stuffing their face with Brexity chips. I would have said fish and chips, but that's a little bit of a sore point for those voters. 12 minutes after 10. What do they represent, these MPs who got in with Boris Johnson in 2019? Because I see them as mini Boris Johnsons. I don't care how many letters of complaint they have submitted. Nobody in Melton Mowbray voted for Alicia Kearns. Nobody in I'm not going to be able to do this off the top of my head. Nobody voted for any of these MPs whose names you can't remember because of who they are. Everybody who voted for these new Tory MPs in the House of Commons voted for Boris Johnson. So I am fascinated by the calculations or contortions that you as a voter in these constituencies, someone who voted Tory in 2019, possibly for the first time, but not necessarily, someone who voted Tory in 2019 and returned an MP for the first time, a Conservative MP for the first time from your constituency, what did you vote for? If not for the idea that Boris Johnson was some sort of messiah. What did you vote for? I don't think you voted for complicated policy announcements. I don't think you voted to abolish the BBC or drape every public building in an enormous union flag. I don't think you voted to have the national anthem pumped out of tannoy speakers on every public square at precisely 7 o'clock every morning. I don't think you voted for health policies or fiscal policy. I don't think you voted for tax policy. I don't think you voted for anything. I'm sorry if I'm offending you, but, you know, you can call me and tear me off a strip. I think you voted for the idea that Boris Johnson was brilliant and Brexit was a great idea. And these MPs who were queuing up to harvest your votes in 2019 were the loudest amplifiers of those two ideas in the country, with the possible exception of the ludicrous right-wing newspapers and their fellow travellers in the broadcast media. So what did you vote for in 2019 in these red wall constituencies if it wasn't for the idea that Boris Johnson could be trusted and Brexit was a brilliant idea? Both of which, you might not be ready to admit the second yet, but the first has been completely exploded by reality and events. And all the people who sat here, even the ones that had to leave the BBC to do it, telling you precisely what Boris Johnson was, what he had been and what he always would be, sit here with a sense of genuine bafflement at what the hell you thought would happen. And I've shifted slightly in the course of this introduction because I think these people are awful. They tool around. The northeast of England, Wigan, Doncaster, elsewhere, tooling around there, telling you Boris Johnson is the answer to all your problems. And then 2 and a bit years later, they're turning around and saying, well, we've got to get rid of him. Just explain it to me. John's in Formby. John, what would you like to say?
Yes, I think a lot of the Red Wall situation was to do with keeping Corbyn out.
Do you?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I think in a lot of elections, it's not a question of who's a great candidate. It's a question of who's the lesser of two evils.
And Corbyn's ability to alienate huge swathes of traditionally Labour voting populations was legendary.
Yes. Well, I think there's another factor which isn't discussed enough, but which I know a lot about living in the north.
Yes.
Is the hatred of the political correctness which is forced down people's throats.
Give me your best example, John.
Well, I could give you loads.
Yeah, go on then. Just give me your best. Give me your best.
A school trip from
yes.
a school in Bradford to the Slavery Museum in Liverpool.
Yes.
And the white pupils who wanted to go were not allowed to go.
See, I'm 99% certain that's not true.
Well, I'm afraid you let your bigotry get the better of you.
No,
because
99%.
I've spoken to several of these pupils.
Okay. What was the school called?
I can name it.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, it was Buttershaw, and the headmistress was Mrs. Hedge.
And you voted in the general election because of a school trip from a school in Bradford?
In part, yes.
Okay. Should we say that again out loud? You cast your vote in the general election because of a story about a school trip from a school in Bradford.
There are many others.
Which politician do you think was most responsible for that?
To ban bacon from a multicultural day centre.
Yes, and well, I suppose I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and genuinely believe that a plan to ban bacon from a multicultural day centre that you don't attend influenced your voting decisions.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, no, I mean, clearly. Just tell me why.
Yes.
Why?
I mean, because I don't like it.
No, but if you went there, and we're talking about tyranny in the context of bacon now, John, so I'll just give you a moment to reflect upon the ridiculousness of that. But if you went to the day centre and you were being deprived of bacon, I could almost understand how that might influence your choice of MP in a general election. But you don't go to the day centre. Did you even live in the relevant constituency?
No.
So they stopped serving bacon in a day centre you never visit, in a constituency you don't live in, and that influenced your choice of MP in a general election.
I am my brother's keeper, and I don't approve.
Well, I'm not interested in your brother. I'm interested in you.
Rotherham and 100 other places either.
And which national MPs bear responsibility for that?
They all do.
All of them. So Conservative, Labour, Liberal, Democrat, all of them.
All those who knew it was going on and did nothing about it.
Well, that's libelous, isn't it? Because that would entail actual conscious knowledge of something and looking the other way. So everything you've said, in answer to the question of why did people vote for Boris Johnson, falls apart at that little point where I say the words Boris Johnson.
No, it doesn't.
It does? So you voted for Boris Johnson because they stopped serving bacon in a community centre you've never visited in a constituency you don't live in?
Well, an area which someone said on the media that you should visit and live in and find out how things really are, because in your London bubble you haven't a clue.
But mate, you don't live in the constituency. You're in a bacon bubble. You're in a bacon bubble. And for the record, John, for the record, mate, I was born in Doncaster.
Here's another one. Use of the public library.
Yes.
At Farsley, it has a toilet.
Yes.
If you are a man and want to use the toilet, you are made to feel very, very uncomfortable, where women are let in without let or hindrance.
Right. How do they make you?
It's all part of the rotten culture that is imposed upon us.
How do they make you feel How do they make you feel uncomfortable when you go to the lavatory? How do they make you feel uncomfortable?
And you
John, please.
Just don't understand how wrong it is and how hated it is.
John, I understand perfectly.
Look at these stories and find out that a lot of them are true.
John, I've written a book about these stories, but I'm more interested in what makes you feel uncomfortable at the lavatory in Farsley Library.
Well, if I read the literature of
No, please don't tell me you haven't. You've been to the lavatory in Farsley Library.
There is an accessible toilet.
You've been there, though.
And when I go to use it,
yes,
I am told it is only for emergencies.
Yes.
But they'll let me use it just as a one-off. And then a woman comes up 20 minutes later, can I use the toilet?
Yes.
Because you can, love.
So your choice of political party in the last general election is influenced by the accessibility of the lavatory in Farsley Library, the availability of bacon in a community centre you've never visited, and an almost certainly apocryphal story about a school trip from a school in Bradford that you neither attend nor live in the relevant constituency. Have I got that right?
Listen,
I have. It's 10:30. Holly Harris is here with the headlines.